Recently, I read on the channel The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel-Shinn. And in her approach to the book, she offered many testimonials regarding experiences from her clients or students, as she called them, with demonstrating the application of universal laws, and in so doing, gaining mastery over the game of life. So if you haven't heard that one yet, make sure that you go to the playlist and grab it. Now, the book I'm reading in this video is titled The Message of a Master by John McDonald. The book is in the public domain. John McDonald was an editor and writer for Fortune magazine, and in this book he shares the wisdoms of universal laws through a story somewhat different from the other formats that the other authors have shared so far. I invite you on a journey with me as I turn the page. To the reader. The following pages are the result of a series of notes collected and set down in the form of a story and a system of practice which accounts for the style of arrangement. The sequential order, as originally received, has been carefully adhered to so that its value to the reader might not be lessened. It sets forth no creed or dogma, but teaches in a clear, understandable, simple way, step by step, a practical, workable procedure based upon divine law for the mastery of environment and conditions. Surely, there is an unexplainable something within its pages which carries a wonderful power for helpfulness and which saturates the reader with a dynamic realization and conviction of what it teaches. This is not a volume to be hurriedly or superficially read. It must be studied in order to gain the priceless wisdom which it contains. Therefore, it is strongly urged that, after having been read through once or twice, it be given the slow, deep, deliberate study which has proved to be the profitable way with a work of this kind. Read it as though it were a message directed to none but yourself. Try to reason out each proposition to your own satisfaction and to get the spirit back of the words. Then apply its teachings to fit your own individual nature and understanding. During your perusal of these pages, should any ideas occur to you concerning your work or ambitions, it is well to lay the book aside for a few moments and meditate upon them. Many profitable ideas have come to readers in this way. Part 1, Chapter 1. Presuming that there are many who are just as skeptical concerning things bordering on the extraordinary as I have been practically all of my life, I offer the following story and system of practice to each reader for what it is worth, with the suggestion that he take it or leave it just as he sees fit. It was Saturday morning, and I had returned from a late lunch. The help had left for the day, and I was alone. My business had dropped off considerably of late, and while conditions were not alarming, yet they were sufficient to cause me some concern. Then again, I had recently indulged in some real estate speculation which had not proved successful. Taking it all in all, it was not a very cheerful outlook. In fact, the most serious problem of my business career was up for solution. Sitting there in deep thought, in an effort to discover a way out, I was aroused by the telephone bell. Placing the receiver to my ear, I was startled at hearing the familiar voice of my old friend, David B. It required no great stretch of the imagination to believe it a voice from the dead. For less than a month before he had left for Europe on the urgent advice of his physician to take an ocean voyage, preferably, but get away somewhere, in the hope that a change would effect an improvement in his condition, which was a serious breakdown, due to worry over conditions which strangely were similar to what I was now experiencing. As he spoke, His voice carried such striking power and feeling that I was reminded of my last impression of Dave as we sorrowfully parted with him, a miserable shadow of his former self, and we questioned as to whether we would ever see him again. But here he was back again, and surely some great change had taken place in him. Remarking that a miracle must have happened, he assured me that I had guessed about right, adding, "Tom, I know that you are puzzled over my early return, and I also know that you never expected to see me again. But I'm back, and I'm the luckiest man in the world, for I learned something that I never knew existed. Tom, nothing is impossible with me anymore, for I can do anything. I am master of my own destiny, and I can make my life anything that I wish it to be." "Oh, don't think I'm crazy. Wait until you hear my story." Feigning a laugh to cover my serious curiosity, I remarked that he must have stumbled over some new-fangled religion, to which he replied, "On the contrary, it concerns no religion of any kind or of any body. You see, I met a master, a wonderful man who has so developed his powers that he can do anything, and he taught me a secret that no price could ever buy. You know that I lost my health and I lost my wealth. Well, I have regained my health and I will have the wealth in no time. Oh, it's a strange story." Of course, I became excited to see him at once, and when to his inquiry about the club, I replied that there were no changes, he hung up after saying, "Meet me there at 9 tonight, and I will unfold a series of the most remarkable and fortunate happenings that could fall to the lot of any man." I sat there unmoved for some minutes like a man in a dream. So completely absorbed had I become in the remarkable recital. Upon recovering myself, I became possessed of the feeling that I had suddenly grown too big for the office, that I had outgrown that little place. I must get outside and expand in the fresh air. Feverish with excitement, I put on my hat and stepped out. Feeling that there was something wonderful for me in his story, I was seized with an uncontrollable desire to hear it at once. I turned in the direction of his office, but recalling that he was no longer there, was forced to wait until evening. The remainder of that day was spent in restlessly pacing the streets, and I was greatly relieved when the hour to go to the club arrived. Having resolved to get Dave away where we would not be disturbed, I entered and stepped quickly to the desk, only to be informed that he had telephoned some time before to tell me that he had been called away and would be back the following evening. Trying to conceal my disappointment and feelings, I turned quickly and was greeted by 3 friends who had seen him, and each was excitedly trying to tell me of the wonders that had taken place. Miserable and disconsolate, I broke away from them without uttering a word, walked out into the night, and home. Too agitated for sleep, the greater part of the night was passed in restless confusion. Assailed by the most illogical thoughts, I decided that the whole thing was a myth, conjured up in a mind weakened as the result of affliction. How utterly ridiculous to allow myself to become upset by such a fairy tale. But no, somehow the thing would not down, but kept forcing itself upon me, until in desperation I tried to console myself with the assurance that I would at any cost learn the truth or falsity of the whole matter the next day. Chapter 2. Following instructions which I had left at the club to be delivered to him immediately upon his return, Dave picked me up at my home in a new, high-priced car, and we drove out to a highway cafe. There, In a private dining room, undisturbed by the presence of others, I had opportunity to study my old friend. Surely some miraculous change had taken place in him. His countenance glowed with health and vitality, and his calm, poised bearing inspired wonderful admiration and confidence. But while I felt perfectly at ease in his company, I also felt the force of some presence in him that I could neither understand or describe. Whatever it was, it had the effect of putting one at ease and yet had the tendency to command respect for something one did not understand. While I felt greatly relieved after the excitement of the previous day, yet I found difficulty in concealing the emotions that surged up within me, for I felt satisfied and convinced that he had something that I sorely needed, and I had the strangest fear lest something might occur even then to prevent my getting it. He broke a momentary silence that seemed hours to me by asking, "Tom, do I look any different than the day I left?" I had to admit that he was both a revelation and a mystery to me. He continued, "It was in a theater in London that I met the man, or the master, as he is called, that I am deeply grateful for the privilege of calling my friend. Tom, you didn't know that I left here determined to end it all. I had made such a mess of my affairs. But I feared to live and I feared to die. I couldn't rest. To keep moving was my only relief. I guess I was what the world would call a hopeless case. As I look back upon that evening in London, how well I now realize that my utter despondency and the intense longing to find something to relieve me drew me and my dear friend together. I had decided upon a regular orchestra seat, but discovered that for some unexplainable reason I had ordered a box and found myself seated beside my friend. Extraordinary happenings such as this occur frequently to many of us and are explained away, because of our ignorance, as merely coincidences. But I know differently now. I could feel that my uneasiness attracted his attention. The wonderful radiance of his countenance assured me that he was an unusual personage, and I felt an instinctive urge to open my heart to him. The remark, "I am sorely troubled," uttered by a character upon the stage, started our acquaintance. I replied, "So am I," in just a whisper, but my friend heard it, and turning to me, he asked, "Are you troubled?" I nodded my head in response, and you may believe me or not, but almost immediately I was at ease. Something seemed to tell me that I had the good fortune of being in the presence of one of those great spiritual people of whom I had read quite a bit in earlier years. I felt convinced that I had met my deliverer, and at the close of the performance was overjoyed at his invitation to accompany him to a nearby cafe. I noticed that the attention of those in the cafe was drawn toward him as we entered, and that the management was noticeably respectful and courteous toward him. Having convinced myself that this man possessed some sort of magical power, I determined to ask him all the questions that I could think of, and with his permission make notes of his answers. Learning that he was taking steamer for New York the next day, I asked if I might accompany him, to which he assented. At the conclusion of our talk, I observed that he merely wrote his initials on the bill, and as we stepped outside to call a cab, I questioned him regarding this, and he admitted that he was not known there, as this was his first visit to the place, but he assured me that they would be paid, adding, "I did this to show you that man in his right domain controls every situation." I was still puzzled, but carried the subject no further, hoping that it would all be made plain to me later. That night, as I lay in a doze, the events of the evening kept passing through my mind, and at times I found difficulty in realizing that my good fortune was real rather than the illusion of a dream. That night, I had the first peaceful sleep in months. Chapter 3. The following morning, up early and supremely happy and eager for what the day would unfold, I immediately applied for a reservation on the steamer, only to be informed that they had a full passenger list. But as I turned away, almost heartbroken at such an unfortunate turn of events, I was recalled by the clerk with the information that a reservation had just been canceled and that I might have it. Instantly, I felt forcibly struck with the thought that there was more of my friend's magic, as I then called it, and I was not mistaken, for he later admitted that he had made a place for me. Of course, you do not understand how the thing works, Tom. Neither did I, at the time, but I do now, and it is, oh, so simple. I believe its simplicity causes it to be overlooked. Presently my friend arrived, with his servant, and as usual, being surrounded by attendants eager to be of service and assistance. I clung to him persistently throughout the entire voyage, and he appeared to enjoy my company. The first evening out, I visited him in his luxuriously furnished stateroom, for he has the best of everything wherever he goes, and while explaining the wonderful forces that man in his ignorance has permitted to lie dormant within him, he gave me several demonstrations of the powers that he has developed. He did things that were actually astounding. He asked, "Why cannot you do what I do? Why cannot all do as I do? I have no powers that you are not endowed with." Here is my answer. Because of my knowledge of universal law, I have developed the God-given powers within me, while you, in your ignorance, have been dissipating and scattering yours. All men use the same power, for in all the universe there is but one power. This is self-evident, as you shall see. Continuing, he said, "The great masses of humanity are using the law destructively, or partially so, and the scales are balanced against them. Here and there among the masses, we find an occasional outstanding figure who has achieved greatness or success, and he is erroneously singled out as lucky or as a genius, when the fact is that he has made use of the law, whether knowingly or unknowingly, it matters not, at least sufficiently to have the scales balanced in his favor. How plain this is to the one who knows. Before the discovery of the law governing the use of electricity, this great force was lying dormant throughout the universe, at least as far as man's knowledge was concerned. He had first to discover the law before he could turn it to his advantage. Just so with this universal law. Happiness is man's rightful heritage. It is the summum bonum of his aspirations. The very soul of man cries out for happiness, but he misinterprets it in terms of money. Why? Because money is a means to an end. It is the motive power which drives us on in our quest for the ultimate, which is happiness. In the world, there cannot be happiness without money. Therefore, the occupation of acquiring money is a worthy and commendable one. Why should man, the supreme creator of the universe, suffer all sorts of lack, misery, and unhappiness when such inferior creatures as the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea are bountifully supplied? For any man, no matter what his situation in life, to take the stand that it is the destiny of man to want for anything that will contribute to his happiness or that of his family is ridiculous. Somebody discovers the law governing the use of etheric waves, and we have radio. Millions of people are now enjoying its advantages. They tune into what they want and they get it. There is a great lesson in this, for believe me, you may have anything you want and in abundance when you learn to tune in with an infinitely greater power than electricity or its vehicle, radio, with a power that you have had from the beginning. The captain of this ship could just as easily own it as run it. One position is no more difficult of attainment than the other. He tuned in to the captaincy successfully. Ownership was a little more distant, and he did not try for distance. That is all. The actual difference in the two positions is merely the difference in two words. Nothing more, as you shall see very plainly when we get a little further along. Each night, after retiring to my room, I would sit up until early morning, reading my notes of the day and preparing questions for the next. He told me that I was very receptive because of my eagerness, sincerity, and trust, and that it was a pleasure to instruct me. And in gratitude, I acknowledged that no price was too high or sacrifice too great in return for such knowledge. In answer to my question as to when and how he discovered such a secret, he said, "I discover nothing, and to me it is no secret. This knowledge has been in our family as far back as our records go. I use it because I know it to be the easy, certain way of accomplishing a purpose, while you have known only the difficult, uncertain way." He seemed never to want to take credit for anything, always claiming that no credit was due him. Chapter 4. I was rapidly regaining my health and strength and was becoming fired with an irresistible ambition to get back and start all over again. Censuring myself for having wasted so many valuable years in fruitless effort in my old way, I was eager to start in the new way. Approaching the end of our voyage and feeling that I was soon to part from my great benefactor, to whom I had become greatly attached and to whom I owed so much, I handed him my card and asked for his, to which he replied, "I have no card, no name, no address. I am like the wind. I come from nowhere and I go everywhere. As for my name, you may call me friend." Saying that I would much prefer to call him master, he replied, "No, not master. Just friend. That will do." Glancing at my card, he said, "I turn up at most unexpected places. I might be out to see you soon. If I do, I will write you." I shall never forget the parting instructions that he gave me. In a manner like a parent with a child, he said, "You are indeed a fortunate man. Just think of the millions of gifted, highly talented people, many blessed with rare qualities for success and leadership, whose achievements would mean so much to their fellow men and happiness and contentment to themselves and their families, who do not know what you know, but who go on striving and straining, wasting their precious life force, only to find themselves dissatisfied, discouraged, disheartened, crushed, as you once were, yet spurred on by that divine spark, that irresistible urge within by which they instinctively realize that there is a way, but which they, in their ignorance, misinterpret and consequently find themselves failures after years of despairing effort. All this you can now avoid. Go home. You have learned all that you will need. If you will diligently follow the instructions that I have given, you may reach any heights. You may accomplish any worthy purpose easily and quickly. There need be no limit to your possibilities. Your successes will multiply and increase in proportion to your mastery of the law. With each success, your faith in the law grows stronger until you reach the point of conviction. then you are invincible. Bear in mind the warning that I have repeatedly given you. Reveal nothing of this to even your dearest friend. To do so before you are powerfully fortified in the law would only tend to interfere with your plans, but particularly it would result in the scattering of your forces and consequently weaken their power for your good. Therefore, keep your secret securely locked within your heart. You will never be able to work out another's problems, neither will another be able to work out yours. This is strictly a matter of each individual. Accomplishment of anything in any line is the result of the operation of this inner force, discovered and set to work, and this must be done by each one for himself. There is no other way. When the time arrives that you shall have retired from commercial pursuits, you may, after seeking the guidance of your conscience, release it for the benefit of others. Thus liberated from further commercial allurements, you will be free to devote your life to the uplift of your fellow man, lending your help to freeing him from the bondage of want, misery, and unhappiness. Reluctantly parting with my benefactor as he entered a taxi with his servant and gave directions to his hotel, I started down the street unconscious of the crowds and with such a peculiar sensation of exaltation and buoyancy that I seemed to be just floating along rather than walking. Sleep had no attraction for me, and it was with difficulty that I induced myself to retire to a hotel. On the train speeding home, I carefully avoided all unnecessary contact with my fellow passengers. I kept to my stateroom. Oh, how I wanted to be alone and to think. I could not think of sparing any of my precious time for worthless, idle conversation and gossip. How useless it seemed to me now, when there was so much to be accomplished. I was just dominated by the one compelling purpose to try out my new teaching, and not another day could be wasted. Nothing else interested me, and nothing else mattered. There you have as much of my story as I am at liberty to reveal at this time, and I give you this much in the hope that it will encourage you to such an extent that you will consider any personal sacrifice well worth the price of such knowledge. For years, I have been blindly seeking what I never imagined existed, and now that I have it, no fortune is large enough to buy it. Noticing upon me the appalling effect of his inability to enlighten me further, Dave attempted to ease my feelings with the assurance that he would see that I got in touch with the master upon his arrival. This only intensified my determination as I excitedly exclaimed, "I'll never wait for an arrival that might never occur. By the gods, I'll find him if you will give me the name of his hotel." So different from his former excitable nature, he remained calm and poised as he replied that he had not overheard the name. Chapter 5. There was nothing for me to do now but settle down as best as I could to impatiently waiting and hoping while he immediately plunged into his former occupation, that of operating in the market. Because of his secretiveness, we knew little of his affairs, although we met him a few times at the club. On such occasions, none of us seemed to have the courage to question him regarding himself, and he talked on every subject but that. However, it was but a short time until his activities reached such proportions that he was compelled to carry on his operations to some extent through a few of his close friends, including myself. It was then that I learned, in part, the magnitude of them. Fearing that such success could not last, I attempted to advise greater caution, warning him that someday his bubble would burst, and then where would he be? With a quick turn toward me, and with his characteristic dominant expression, he replied, "Tom, you need have no concern about my welfare. I operate according to definite, unerring law. If you want to get the square feet contained in this room, you would get the 2 dimensions, and following a process laid down by the law of mathematics, you would arrive at a definite result. You would be certain of the success of the process from the beginning. Just so with my work. I know the outcome before I start." That was the last mention I ever made to him of his affairs, and he never referred to them. There seemed to be no stopping to him, for he went on from one success to another. His perpetual energy and vitality seemed to never lag, and the dynamic force with which he seemed to dominate every situation and overwhelm all opposition to his progress was actually superhuman. At the end, few social gatherings which he attended, his magnetic personality and the mystery with which his name was associated made him the center of attention. Because of his desire to avoid notice, I saw little of him for some time, and hearing no news of the master, I had just about become resigned to my fate when one day his secretary telephoned that there was a letter at his office which would interest me. Hurrying over, I was handed a letter, written on the stationery of a prominent hotel and addressed to him, which read, "Detained by important affairs. Regret to have to forego a visit with you this time," and signed, "Your friend." At last my chance had come. The hotel was my only clue, but it was enough. Hastily getting my 3 interested associates together, we left, and that evening found us speeding eastward in our quest of the master and the secret. Entering the hotel, upon our arrival, I went direct to the manager and informed him of our mission. He knew immediately and told me that because of the many visitors who were crowding the master, he had departed, leaving no address. He had no further information to give us. Again, I was thoroughly disheartened. Was I ever to learn that secret? I really believe that I was not. However, we got a good description of him and decided to continue our search. We separated in order to work more effectively, but our search was without success until the night of the 5th day. I sat alone in the lobby of our hotel that night after my associates had retired, following an hour of argument in an effort to persuade me to return home. I decided that I would not give up. I would continue the search forever if necessary. Sitting there in a deserted corner at that hour in the early morning, my feelings suddenly changed from utter despondency to joyous elation. Somehow, I knew that my search was at an end, and while pondering over this, I became possessed of a sense of some presence behind me. Immediately, a hand touched my shoulder. I arose, turned, and there before me, I looked into the most magnificent face that I have ever seen. And the eyes, they sparkled like jewels, and a voice said, "Are you looking for me?" I merely answered, "I am," for I knew it was he. I will not go into his explanation of the causes which led up to our meeting, but after a long talk, during which he explained that his time was so busily occupied that there was no way in which he could give any instructions, that he was not even receiving visitors during this short visit to this country, but that he would advise me of his next visit, I vehemently explained with all the intensity of my being that I was desperately in need of him, that we had come thousands of miles to learn his wisdom, and that I was willing to sacrifice anything for just a little of his knowledge. My desperation and the intensity of my appeal must have aroused his compassion, for he agreed to receive us for instructions the following morning at his apartment. Chapter 6. The sight that met our eyes as we entered his apartment that morning will stand out vividly in my memory. Never before or since have I seen such luxurious and extravagance displayed as in the furnishings of that place. It seemed like desecration to tread upon those magnificent silk rugs as we were led by his servant through a room delicately perfumed by an abundance of flowers artistically arranged, to a room which appeared to be his study and where chairs had already been placed for us. His entry immediately after was followed by a round of introductions, names, occupations, and general remarks. We had expected to see him attired in some gorgeous style in keeping with his surroundings, but were struck by the simplicity in both his dress and his bearing. My impression was that, being conscious of his power, he preferred to shun publicity and people rather than be the object of any attention, and he explained the presence of the furnishings by saying that he loved beautiful things and therefore surrounded himself with them. He began our instructions by saying, "You may have come here in expectation of seeing a mysterious being endowed with mystic powers, a sort of magician who can pull a fortune out of the air and pass it over to you. You have very much misled yourselves. I am just an ordinary man, no different than you are. The world calls such as me a master, and so I am, but only in the sense that I have learned how to master environment and conditions, that I have developed in me the powers that abide alike in all of us, and that I am more nearly living life as it should be lived. I realize that you have come here because of your faith in me, and that you look upon me somewhat as an exalted personality. But in order that you may gain the greatest benefit from these teachings, I will ask that you wipe out any impression that you may have of me as a personality. I assure you that I am worthy of no honor or homage. I am just a human like yourself. I am not a superior being. Rather, I am a humble being, thankful for the knowledge that I have gained. I made no discoveries. I received these instructions in much the same manner that I am about to give them to you. You will find no difficulty in putting these principles into practice in your everyday affairs. They are as available to you as to me, for this great law is no respecter of persons. It is the highest and most effective possible in worldly affairs, and is well worth learning, for its practice results in a life that is well worth living. Employing these principles wisely and intelligently, there can be no uncertainty as to the outcome of any undertaking and no limit to your possibilities. As you go on, your confidence increases and you find that your powers are increasing. You accomplish greater things with greater ease and greater speed. As its growth in you increases, your accomplishments increase likewise. With many, remarkable improvement comes quickly, as in the case of your friend who is responsible for you being here today. With others, the growth is more gradual. The difference is not any difference in the individual, for all are endowed with the same capacity. But it is a difference in the degree of intensity employed. However, no man could ever receive these instructions and not become a better man because of them. No great things are accomplished in the consciousness of personality. That is impossible, for personality is limiting. Therefore, accept these lessons for just what they mean to you alone as an individual entity. Let not my presence or your impressions of me influence you in any way in your studies. Learn from my words only, not from me. Now let us proceed. End of part 1. Yes, there is a part 2, but before we head over there, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Tell me, what do you think about the story so far? Intrigued? Let's satiate our curiosity as we head over to the next video for part 2.